Her tiny fingers tightened around the strap of her school bag as she walked slowly down the cracked pavement. The morning air was filled with laughter, children running, their polished shoes gleaming in the sun. But for her, every step was heavy. Her shoes, torn at the sides, flapped against the ground, barely holding together. "Why do they always have to laugh?" she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling, eyes lowering to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. "Because people laugh at what they don't understand," she answered herself quietly, almost as though she were trying to build her own courage. She was just 7 years old, but her words carried the weight of someone who had been forced to grow older too quickly. Behind her, a group of kids pointed. "Look at her shoes! They look like they've been through a war!" one boy shouted. The laughter echoed, cruel and sharp. She stopped walking. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry in front of them. She turned slowly, her small face lifting, her messy braids swaying gently. "My shoes may be torn," she said, her voice shaking but determined, "but they carry me further than your laughter ever will." For a moment, silence blanketed the group. Then the laughter returned, louder this time, but different. Nervous, uneasy. They didn't expect her to speak back. They didn't expect courage from the girl with broken shoes. She walked into the schoolyard, her baby brother's voice still echoing in her mind. The night before, when she tucked him into their old couch where he slept, he had whispered, "Promise me, sis, you'll keep smiling tomorrow." She had nodded, though she knew it would be hard. In the classroom, she sat quietly in the back. Her teacher, Mrs. Lawson, noticed her shoes and her silent demeanor. Something about the little girl struck her, an unusual strength hidden behind the quiet. At recess, while others played tag, she sat alone on the bench, sketching with a broken pencil on the back of an old paper bag. Her sketches were rough but alive. People, animals, dreams of things beyond the neighborhood she lived in. A voice interrupted her. "Hey, why are you always drawing?" It was one of the girls who had laughed earlier. "Because when I draw, no one can take it away from me," she replied, not looking up. The girl rolled her eyes. "Well, your shoes look terrible." Before the little girl could respond, Mrs. Lawson walked over. "Emily, is that how we treat others?" she said firmly. Emily shrugged, but the little girl didn't speak. She simply folded her paper bag sketch and slipped it carefully into her bag as if it were treasure. After school, the laughter followed her again as she walked home. But what none of them saw was what happened when she opened the front door of her small apartment. Her baby brother ran to her, barefoot, smiling wide. "You're home," he said, hugging her tightly. In that moment, the torn shoes didn't matter. She was his hero, his protector. "Did they laugh again?" he asked softly. "Yes," she admitted. He frowned. "I wish I could make them stop." She smiled, brushing his hair. "You don't need to. One day they'll see. One day they'll understand." That night she sat by the window looking at the city lights. She whispered to herself, "They laughed at my torn shoes. But shoes don't decide how far I'll go. I do." Her words weren't just for comfort, they were a promise. The following morning, something unexpected began to unfold. As she walked into school again, clutching her bag, she noticed an announcement posted on the board. Art competition. Theme, Dreams Beyond the Horizon. Her eyes widened. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark, something inside her that told her this was her chance. She knew she didn't have proper supplies. No paint sets, no markers, no canvas. But she had her broken pencil, her scraps of paper, and the dreams she carried inside her heart. That afternoon, as the other kids bragged about the paints their parents had bought, she sat in the corner, sketching furiously on paper bags, old newspapers, anything she could find. Her hands moved with purpose, each line filled with emotion. When the teacher asked, Are you sure you want to submit that? She lifted her head and answered with quiet confidence, It's not about the paper. It's about what's on it. The kids laughed again, whispering behind her back. But she didn't stop this time. For the first time, she was running, not from their laughter, but toward her dream. The days leading up to the art competition felt like a storm inside her. Every night, after finishing her homework and making sure her little brother had eaten, she would sit by the window with scraps of paper and a broken pencil. Her brother, always watching her, asked one night, "Why do you draw so much, sis?" She looked at him, her tired eyes softening. "Because when I draw, I can see the world I want us to live in, not the one that laughs at my shoes." He leaned his head against her arm. "Do you think you'll win?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but even if I don't, I'll know I tried." The morning of the competition arrived. She carefully carried her folded sketches in an old folder, clutching it as though it held her soul. Walking into the school gymnasium, her heart pounded. The room was filled with color, bright canvases painted with expensive sets, sparkling materials, carefully polished work that screamed of privilege. As she placed her fragile sketches on the table, whispers filled the room. "Is that paper bags? She's not serious. Look at those shoes. She couldn't even afford new ones for today." Their laughter was sharp, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she straightened her torn shoes, placed her drawings with care, and whispered to herself, "Dreams beyond the horizon. That's what they wanted, right?" Her teacher, Mrs. Lawson, walked by and paused. She studied the drawings carefully. Each sketch told a story. Children holding hands across different countries, a little house surrounded by a garden, a girl standing on a mountain with the sun rising behind her. They weren't perfect in technique, but they were alive. They breathed with feeling. "You have something very rare," Mrs. Lawson said softly, almost to herself. "You have honesty in your art." But the kids didn't stop mocking. During lunch, one boy walked past her and muttered, "Maybe if you win, you can buy new shoes." His friends burst into laughter. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at him. "Maybe I'll buy books instead. Shoes wear out. Knowledge doesn't." His smirk faded. For a second, he had no reply. Later that afternoon, the judges arrived. They were local artists, teachers, and even a city council member. They walked slowly around the room, observing each piece. Parents gathered, proud of their children's polished displays. When the judges reached her table, a hush fell. They leaned in, touching the rough paper, their eyes narrowing not in judgment, but in surprise. One of them asked, "Who made these?" She raised her small hand. "I did." "What's your name?" "Amara," she said softly. The judge looked again at her drawings. "Why did you choose these materials?" "Because it's what I had," she answered honestly. "Dreams don't wait for perfect paper. They can live anywhere, even on trash." The room went silent. Even the children who had mocked her stopped whispering. The judges exchanged glances, clearly moved. "Thank you, Amara," one said warmly. When the competition ended, everyone gathered for the announcement. She stood in the back, holding her brother's hand tightly. Her shoes looked even more worn after the long day, but her eyes were steady. The announcer cleared his throat. "Third place goes to—" Cheers erupted. "Second place goes to—" More cheers. And now, first place. The entire gym seemed to lean forward. "The winner is Amara Johnson." For a moment, she thought she misheard. Her brother squeezed her hand so tightly it hurt. "You did it, sis," he whispered, eyes glowing with pride. Gasps rippled through the room. Some kids' mouths hung open, disbelief written across their faces. The same children who had mocked her shoes now stared as if they'd seen something impossible. Amara slowly walked to the front, her folder pressed against her chest. Her torn shoes slapped against the polished floor, echoing louder than the cheers that followed. The judge handed her a small golden trophy and a scholarship certificate. Her hands trembled as she took it. "You taught us something today," the judge said into the microphone. "Art is not about the materials you own, it's about the heart you pour into it. Amara, you reminded us all that greatness can come from the humblest places." Applause filled the gym. Mrs. Lawson wiped away a tear. Even Emily, the girl who had mocked her earlier, looked away, ashamed. But Amara didn't smile for the crowd. She turned to her little brother, lifted the trophy for him to see, and whispered, "This is for us." That night when they got home, they placed the trophy on the old wooden shelf above the couch. Her brother touched it gently. "You see, sis? They don't laugh now." Amara looked at him, her eyes soft but firm. "They'll always laugh at something, but what matters is that we don't stop." He nodded slowly, as if her words were carving themselves into his young heart. The following week, the story spread beyond the school. Local newspapers picked it up. Girl wins competition with paper bag drawings. Neighbors stopped her in the street, some apologizing for looking down on her family, others congratulating her with warmth. But she stayed humble. Every day, she still walked to school in the same torn shoes, holding her brother's hand, carrying her bag of sketches. Because for her, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could keep walking, no matter what was on her feet. And that journey had only just begun. The days after the competition brought a change Amara had never imagined. For the first time in her life, she was not invisible. Teachers spoke to her with warmth. Classmates who once mocked her began to greet her in hesitant voices, and neighbors nodded as she passed by with her little brother. But recognition didn't erase the struggles at home. Their tiny apartment still leaked when it rained. Dinner was still sometimes just rice and beans stretched thin. Her shoes, those same torn ones that everyone had laughed at, were still the only pair she owned. One morning, as she walked into class, Emily, the girl who had mocked her shoes, stood waiting. Amara paused, unsure. Emily shifted uncomfortably, then muttered, Hey." Amara's eyes narrowed slightly, guarded. "Hi. I just wanted to say—" Emily hesitated. "I was wrong. About the shoes. About everything. Your drawings were amazing." Amara didn't smile right away. She studied Emily carefully, trying to see if the words were genuine. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you." Emily glanced down at Amara's shoes, guilt flickering across her face. "Do they hurt?" she asked softly. Amara looked at them, then back up. "Sometimes. But they've carried me this far. That's enough." It was the first time Emily had nothing cruel to say. Instead, she walked beside Amara into class, quiet and thoughtful. Weeks passed, and the story of Amara's win spread further. A local community center invited her to display her drawings. Nervous but excited, she agreed. Her little brother tagged along, proudly holding her folder of sketches as though it were treasure. At the center, families walked through the small exhibit. Some stopped to admire her work, asking questions. One man bent down to her level and said, "You have a gift. Don't ever stop." Amara's heart swelled. For so long, she had been the girl with torn shoes. Now, she was the girl with dreams bigger than paper bags. But not everyone was happy. The same kids who had mocked her, now jealous of her attention, whispered cruelly again, "She just got lucky." Those judges felt sorry for her. "She doesn't really belong here." Amara overheard them one afternoon, her hands tightening around her folder. She wanted to cry, but she didn't. She whispered instead, "Let them talk. My shoes already know the truth. They've carried me through worse." Her brother overheard too. That night he said, "Why do they keep picking on you, sis? You already showed them." Amara knelt in front of him. "Because sometimes people don't know how to handle what they don't understand. But we don't fight them with anger. We fight by shining brighter." Her words were steady, but deep down, she was tired. Tired of laughter, tired of judgment. She wondered if her small victories really mattered. Then, one day, something happened that changed everything. The school announced a citywide art competition, bigger than the first. This time, the prize wasn't just a trophy. It was a scholarship to an art academy and national recognition. When Amara saw the flyer, her heart skipped. Her hands trembled. It was the chance of a lifetime, but doubt crept in. What if I can't do it again? What if they're right, and the first time was just pity? That night, she sat by the window, staring at her pencil. Her brother crawled beside her and placed his tiny hand over hers. "Sis, you always say dreams don't wait for perfect paper. Maybe they don't wait for perfect courage either." She turned to him, eyes filling. He was only 5, yet he carried wisdom beyond his years. "You think I should try again?" He nodded fiercely. "Yes, because you don't draw for them. You draw for us." His words lit a fire inside her. She picked up her pencil, unfolded another scrap of paper, and began to draw. This time it wasn't just sketches, it was visions. She drew her brother standing tall, holding books. She drew herself older, painting on a real canvas. She drew their mother, who had left long ago, holding their hands again. Her drawings became not just art, but prayers whispered in lines and shapes. The day of the city competition arrived. The venue was massive. Bright lights, professional judges, hundreds of talented kids from wealthy families, all carrying expensive supplies. Amara stood at the entrance, clutching her folder, her torn shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. People stared again. Whispers followed her. Is she lost? She doesn't look like she belongs here. Her chest tightened, but then she felt a small hand slip into hers. Her brother looked up at her with wide, steady eyes. "We belong anywhere you decide we belong." She inhaled deeply and walked forward, and when the competition began, the room filled with colors and strokes of brushes on canvases. Amara sat quietly at her small station, spreading out her rough paper. The judges passed by, surprised at her simple tools. But when her pencil touched the page, silence fell around her. Her hand moved like it was guided by something beyond her. She drew not just images, but stories. Her life, her pain, her hope. She drew her torn shoes, but instead of broken, she transformed them into wings, carrying her beyond the clouds. She drew laughter, sharp and cruel, but turned it into music notes, transforming pain into beauty. She drew herself standing at the edge of a horizon, holding her brother's hand, with the sun rising before them. When time ended, the judges walked the room. They stopped at her table for a long time. One of them whispered, "This is more than art. This is courage." The announcement ceremony came. Nervous competitors gathered, some confident, some fidgeting. Amara stood with her brother, clutching his hand so tightly he whispered, "You're squeezing too hard." She laughed softly through her fear. Third place was called, then second. Cheers erupted each time. Finally, first place. The announcer's voice boomed. "The winner of this year's citywide art competition, Amara Johnson." The room erupted in shock. Some gasped, some clapped, some stayed frozen in disbelief. Amara's brother screamed with joy. "She did it!" and hugged her waist tightly. As Amara walked forward, tears filled her eyes. The stage lights blinded her, but she kept walking, her shoes flapping with every step. She held the certificate in trembling hands as the announcer said, "This young artist has shown us that true art does not come from what we own. It comes from the soul." The applause was thunderous. In that moment, Amara remembered every laugh, every cruel word, every time someone told her she didn't belong. She stood on that stage, her torn shoes in plain view, her brother by her side, and thought, "They laughed at me, but look where my shoes carried me. From that day forward, people no longer remembered her as the girl with torn shoes. They remembered her as the girl who turned scraps into masterpieces, the girl whose courage outshone the cruelty around her. But Amara never let it make her arrogant. She still walked home through the same cracked pavement, still tucked her brother into the couch bed, still drew by the window late at night. Because she knew the greatest victories are not about trophies. They're about never letting laughter break your spirit. And years later, when she stood as a young woman opening her first art gallery, she placed her old torn shoes inside a glass case at the entrance. The plaque beneath them read, "These shoes carried me further than laughter ever could." People walked by, staring at the shoes, some with tears in their eyes. And every person who entered her gallery left with a reminder they would never forget. They laughed at her torn shoes, but in the end, those very shoes carried her into a future no one saw coming. Maybe today you'll see someone with worn-out clothes, old shoes, or a tired face. Instead of laughing, try kindness. Because you never know, the person you overlook might be carrying a dream bigger than you can imagine. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Black Saga, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and share this video with someone who needs hope today.